Hi everyone, I'm going to be talking on what it means to be a healthy leader, and this is going to be a fun moment and obviously there are so many aspects to it and so many angles to it. Paul's relationship with Timothy, he writes him two letters which are affectionately called the pastoral letters. I don't think that's a great word for them. They should rather be called the pastor letters. So if you read 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy and you were to separate what Paul instructs for Timothy to implement in the church and what Paul instructs Timothy to implement in his own personal life, you'll get a surprise. So much of what Paul writes to Timothy is about what he's to do in his own life as a leader, to keep him as a healthy, growing, strong leader. And he covers subjects like this. He deals with Timothy's devotional life, he deals with his ministry, his relationships, old, young, woman, men, rich, poor. He speaks into that. He speaks into his purity, sexual purity. He addresses his speech, even tells him about his diet, encourages him to exercise, not too little and not too much, and he speaks into the area of his emotions, of his self-confidence. 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 7 says that God has not given us a spirit to make us fear, but a spirit of power and of love, and some versions say sound mind, others say self-control, and others say self-discipline. And so I know this is not the most favorite word for us to hear, but I think a whole bunch of being a healthy leader revolves around this subject, or this quality of self-discipline. Now, you will have different areas that are important to you. I'm going to tell you, for me, the areas that I feel are important for self-discipline. The one is, well, number one would be devotional. Number two would be emotional. I'm not that great at something. Number three would be relational. Number four would be physical. Number five would be financial. Number six would be sensual. And number seven, you might not have thought of this, but number seven would be vocal. So I think that in each one of these areas, we have to develop, and the Holy Spirit is in us to do that, to develop disciplines in our devotional life, in our emotional life, our thinking, our feeling. For some of us, that's more of a challenge than others. In our relational life, there needs to be a discipline, who we relate to, how we relate to them, how much we relate to them, the priorities of relationships. Physically, in terms of our diet, our exercise, our rest. Financially, in terms of what we give, what we spend, how we save. Sensual disciplines, what we watch, what we listen to. And vocal discipline, what we say and how we say it. And if you listen to people, and if you listen to the language of the church, this discipline in our speech is absolutely vital. And so if you contemplate these disciplines, and you might have a couple of others that you think, these are important disciplines in my life, or maybe you look at some of these and you say they're not that important, you go and work that out, and you figure out in those disciplines what needs to be in order for the discipline to be in order. Now, I'd like to say three things about disciplines. Number one is define them. Now, I don't mean define them like a New Year's resolution where you're all motivated, rah, 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 now I'm going to go and... No, in the presence of God, asking the Holy Spirit to lead you and guide you. Let Him speak into your heart to define what disciplines need to be there and what those disciplines look like. Number two, don't rank them. What do I mean by that? Well, if you were to look at these disciplines over here, you would say, surely devotional discipline, my prayer life, worship, words, surely that is more important than physical, whether I eat properly, a diet, exercise. Well, not really. You might be fantastically disciplined in your devotional life, but you are so poor physically that actually you can't even preach for 15 minutes. And when people look at you, they're not so sure if they want to listen to you. I'm so sorry if that sounds a little bit harsh. But what I'm saying is that you can't rank these things and say that's more important than that. You might be relationally brilliant and really disciplined, but financially shocking. And so what I do is that I don't rank them and say this one's more important than that one. I just say these things are all important. And so I need to fit them all into my life. If I find that life is getting really tight and I haven't got time to fit them all in, I don't chop one out. I just squeeze the amount of space I give each one in my day. So I would go to gym most days for an hour. If I find that I'm tight, I don't just stop gym, because once you give up a discipline, it's very, very hard to get it kick-started again. Whereas if you just compress it, keep it in place, just compress it, when your space opens up, it's so much easier to just continue that discipline. I hope that makes sense. And then number 3, I couldn't find a D, is accountable. See, I think that with our disciplines, there needs to be somebody that we are accountable with our disciplines to. And so the question would simply be this: who's your Paul? So Paul had a very good look in Timothy's life, was able to write him 2 books of what he needed to implement. Who's able to look in your life, be that close, be that familiar, that they can write you a book and say, this needs to be done, that needs to be done, and give you a sense of, yeah, I'm accountable in this thing. The last thing I'd like to ask or look at is this, is how do you pick yourself up? Because if you're leading, stuff is going to happen. It's going to wear you out. And you have to figure out for yourself what things pick you up. I've got a couple of things I do. If I'm struggling, I immerse myself in His Word. Not to study, not to prepare a sermon, just to read it. It like washes over my soul. I must read a whole book. Second thing I do is I pick up my guitar and I worship. And it can be for 5 minutes, it can be for an hour, but I just worship God. The third thing I do is I take a walk. And I find if I'm in my study or I'm in the house, things distract me. Then there's a gutter that needs fixing, or my wife calls me and she wants me to build a new room or something like that. So I take a walk and I will pray in tongues for an hour, hour and a half, and that lifts me up. Other thing that I find works for me if I'm needing to pick myself up is physical exercise. It used to be riding a motorbike. Unfortunately, I don't do that very much anymore now. I must go to gym or take a jog or something like that. And the fifth thing for me that would definitely pick me up is time with my wife. So this is a big topic, and it's really, really important that we are not perfect. God never looks for perfection, but that we're healthy. I really hope that God leads you and helps you, and you listen to the Holy Spirit to not just be healthy in a moment, but to stay healthy. Thank you.